Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
It had been one of those gray-skied, late autumn Sundays where the air already felt like December, the kind of day that hangs heavy even before anything happens. The roads were wet, not from rain, but from a mist that seemed to cling to every surface, like it had something to prove. I'd driven the 35 minutes back to my mother's house on autopilot, windshield wipers squeaking against the glass every few seconds, the radio humming something forgettable. My sister Vanessa was already there, judging by the black BMW parked out front, still gleaming despite the drizzle. I parked down the block not because there wasn't room in the driveway, there always was, but because I couldn't stand the idea of walking in right behind her like we were some kind of team. I hadn't seen Vanessa in about 4 months, not since her engagement party. She looked different then, all polished and radiant like she'd just stepped out of a magazine cover for women who win at life. She was marrying some guy named Carter or Carlton. I honestly couldn't remember, and I didn't ask questions. At the party, Mom introduced me to people as her other daughter, like I was a placeholder or a footnote. I'd smiled through it, of course. Smiled until my jaw hurt and the wine turned to vinegar in my mouth. Walking up to the house, I noticed Mom had already put up the Christmas lights, even though it was only the first week of November. Of course she had. She always needed everything done early, as if life came with a competition scorecard. The door was unlocked, as usual. Inside, the familiar smell of rosemary chicken and lemon pledge hit me at the same time. I took off my boots, wiped the water from my glasses, and braced myself. The table was set like we were expecting royalty, cloth napkins folded like swans, wine glasses at every seat, candles flickering even though it was still daylight. Vanessa was already sitting down, perfect posture, her dark hair twisted into some complicated knot that probably cost $100 at a salon downtown. She was laughing at something Mom said, and Mom was laughing too, high-pitched, artificial, the sound of a woman who thinks she still holds all the power in the room. "Lena," my mom said, not bothering to stand or even look up from her glass of Chardonnay. "You're late, but at least you're not wearing those dreadful jeans again." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Good to see you too, Mom." I sat down. Said nothing else. I'd learned by now that speaking too much was a trap. Mom only ever listened long enough to find an opening for criticism. She passed me the chicken, then the salad, then the mashed potatoes with too much butter, exactly how Dad used to like them before he died 5 years ago. No one ever talked about him anymore. It was like he'd been quietly edited out of the script, except for the recipes. We ate in silence for a minute or two, the sound of cutlery scraping against porcelain filling the room. Then Vanessa launched into a monologue about her new job. "The firm's expanding into international markets," she said, voice full of pride. "They actually offered me a spot in their Singapore office, but I turned it down. Carter and I decided to stay stateside for now. Too much planning with the wedding, you know." Mom's face lit up like someone had switched her on. "Oh, honey, that's so smart. You always know exactly what to do." I chewed a piece of chicken so hard I thought I'd break a tooth. Mom kept going. "Lena, you should listen to your sister more. She really knows how to navigate life." Vanessa gave me a pitying smile, the kind that isn't really a smile at all. "Thanks, Mom." Then it happened. Right when I reached for the gravy, Mom leaned back, cradling her wine glass like she was about to make a toast. "You know," she said casually, "you'll never be as pretty or successful as your sister, Lena. But at least you're dependable." Silence. I didn't look up. Didn't say a word. I just poured the gravy onto my plate, watching it swirl over the mashed potatoes like lava. Vanessa made a sound, kind of like a cough mixed with a laugh, but she didn't say anything either. Coward. Typical. The kind of silence that screams. I ate the rest of my food slowly, deliberately. Let the bitterness sink in like a marinade. When I was finished, I cleared my plate and everyone else's, stacking the dishes like I had every damn Sunday since I was 12. I washed them without being asked, dried them without complaint, wiped down the counters like a dutiful daughter, because that's what I was trained to do. Vanessa and Mom had moved into the living room by then, sipping wine and watching some reality show rerun, already onto the next thing. I stayed in the kitchen until my hands were pruned and the dishwasher hummed behind me like a lullaby for the dead. When I finally left, I didn't say goodbye. I walked straight out the door, the cold air smacking me in the face like a wake-up call I should have gotten years ago. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes before starting it, hands shaking on the wheel, throat tight with unshed anger. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, trying to remember the last time my mom said something kind to me without it being followed by a but. The next morning, I deleted her number from my phone. 2 months passed. Then, yesterday, Vanessa texted me for the first time in weeks. "Call me. Mom's crying and won't say why." The text came in around 10:32 on a Thursday morning, that kind of chilly midwinter day where your breath fogs up the glass, and everything feels a little too quiet, like the sky itself is holding its breath. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table, eating cold toast and scrolling mindlessly through news I didn't care about, when my phone lit up with Vanessa's name. I didn't open it right away, didn't need to. There's a certain rhythm to guilt texts, a certain staleness to their timing, and this one carried the weight of someone trying not to sound desperate but failing anyway. Eventually, I unlocked the screen and read the words that were clearly not meant to be as hollow as they felt. "Call me. Mom's crying and won't say why." I stared at it for a while, like maybe if I waited long enough the words would dissolve into something useful. But they didn't. They just sat there, smug and heavy, like Vanessa was handing me a problem to fix that wasn't mine to begin with. I locked the screen, put the phone face down, and went back to staring at my half-eaten toast. I wasn't hungry anymore. Hadn't been for weeks really, not since that dinner where our mother decided to dig the knife in just a little deeper than usual. And maybe what made it worse wasn't what she said, but how easy it was for her to say it. The second text came 3 hours later. No pleasantries, no punctuation, just, "Seriously, Lena. She won't talk to me." I didn't answer that one either. I wasn't being cruel, not exactly. I was being silent in the same way the ocean can be silent, huge, cold, and deliberate. Because that's the thing nobody ever tells you about being the disappointment child. Eventually you stop asking why and start realizing they'll never give you the answer that matters. They don't ignore you because they don't see you. They ignore you because they do, and what they see doesn't fit the image they built in their head. So they chip away at you until all that's left is whatever version they can stomach, and they call that love. Around 6:30 that evening, I finally played the voicemail Vanessa left. Her voice was tight, like she'd been crying but didn't want me to hear it. She said Mom wasn't eating. Said she just sat on the couch all day, staring out the window like she was waiting for something that wasn't coming. Said she tried asking if she was okay, and that Mom had just waved her away with a tissue and muttered something about things falling apart. I nearly laughed at that part. Falling apart? Now she decides to fall apart? After holding it together like a goddamn dictator for 6 decades, now she's fragile? It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. I poured a glass of wine I didn't want and sat on the floor of my living room, back against the cold radiator, watching the snow start to gather outside. I thought about the birthdays she'd missed. Not physically, of course, she always showed up, but emotionally, mentally, she might as well have been in another country. Every cake felt like a bribe, every gift like an obligation. She'd forget the things I cared about, but she always remembered to mention how Vanessa's skin was just glowing or how Vanessa never struggled with her weight like that. There was that one year, I think I was turning 19, when I saved up for months to buy a used camera. I'd been obsessed with photography at the time, wanted to go to art school in Oregon. I showed her my favorite photo I'd taken, this candid shot of an old man feeding pigeons near the train station. She looked at it for 3 seconds before saying, "It's nice, but don't you think it's a bit grim?" Then she suggested I ask Vanessa for help with my resume instead. I should have stopped trying after that. But I didn't. I kept showing up, kept pretending that someday she'd see me the way she saw Vanessa. I brought home a college acceptance letter once, printed it out in color, handed it to her like a prize. She asked if Vanessa helped me write the application. I said no. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Really? You learn not to feel too much after that. And when the feelings stop coming, it's not as dramatic as you'd think. It doesn't hurt like a stab. It's more like a faucet you forgot to turn off, just a slow, endless drip until the room floods and you're left standing ankle-deep in everything you never said." I think that's what scared me most. Not that she hurt me, but that I couldn't even feel the hurt anymore. Not even when she was apparently breaking down, dissolving into the same kind of emptiness she'd left me in for decades. At some point that night, I said it out loud. Quiet, almost like a prayer. She's finally feeling what I felt. The thing is, I moved out when I was 20, and now I'm 34. That's what, 15 years? 15 years of space and silence and growth. And yet somehow, that number still feels too small, like no amount of time could have stretched far enough to make me whole again. I left the voicemail on my phone, didn't delete it, didn't respond. Because not all messages need answering, and not every mother gets forgiven just because she's falling apart. After Vanessa's message and the voicemail I listened to 3 times in the dark just to hear the cracks in her voice, I didn't do what most people would do. I didn't call her back. I didn't rush to comfort our mother. I didn't drive over with a box of tissues and an apology for being distant. Instead, I did something that I should have done years ago, maybe decades. If I'm honest with myself, I opened the box. The box had been sitting in my closet since the week of my father's funeral, taped shut with brittle yellow masking tape, the kind that disintegrates when you touch it. It had his name scrawled across the top in his unmistakable handwriting, blocky, slanted letters with a pen that was always running out of ink. I never opened it, not once, because back then I was too raw and too tired and too used to pretending like things didn't matter. But that night, with snow tapping on the window and my phone buzzing for the 5th time in 2 days, I sat cross-legged on the floor and peeled the tape off slowly, like I was performing surgery on something still breathing. Inside were old pictures, envelopes, and a brown leather-bound notebook, the kind you buy when you plan to do something meaningful and never quite get around to it. The first thing I saw was a letter addressed to me, sealed but unglued, as if he knew I wouldn't open it until I really needed to. The paper was thin and smelled like dust and closet air. I unfolded it with shaking fingers and started to read, my breath catching halfway through the first paragraph. He wrote about how proud he was of me, how he'd watched me grow into someone thoughtful, quiet, and strong, even if I didn't believe it myself. He told me he wished he'd protected me more from my mother's expectations, a word he underlined twice like it had claws. He said he'd left something for me, money, for one thing, and something else, something more valuable, the truth. He didn't trust her, not completely. Said so right in the letter. Said she had a habit of rewriting stories to fit whatever mood she was in that day. I read that line 3 times before realizing I'd heard almost the exact same words from Vanessa once, whispered over wine when Mom was out of the room. "You know how she is," she'd said, almost ashamed. She remembers things selectively. The trust fund was listed in a copy of the will I found under the notebook, tucked between some utility bills and old birthday cards. My name, a specific amount. Instructions for it to be released when I turned 25. I stared at it like it was written in another language. I'd never seen a penny. Never even heard a mention of it. Not on my 25th birthday. Not after. Not ever. I called the bank the next day. At first, they were hesitant to speak with me, citing policy and protocol and all that bureaucratic crap. But I faxed them a copy of the will. Yes, a fax, because apparently that's still a thing, and within 2 hours, I got a return call from a woman named Sandra, who sounded like she hadn't expected my name to be real. "Miss Bennett, according to our records, that trust was dissolved 2 years ago. Closed by your mother, using a limited power of attorney, which she submitted with the death certificate. I didn't say anything for several seconds. I just stood in the middle of my kitchen, phone pressed against my cheek, staring at a crack in the tile floor like it had answers. I never gave her power of attorney, I finally said. Sandra paused, the kind of pause that tells you she knows something's wrong, but isn't legally allowed to say so. I understand. If you'd like to contest the release, you'd need to speak with a legal representative. I hung up before she could finish the sentence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive over and throw the documents in her smug, frozen face and ask her what kind of mother steals from her own daughter. But I didn't. Not because I was scared, but because that would have made it too easy for her to play the victim again. No, I wasn't going to let her flip the script this time. Instead, I called a lawyer. A real one. Not a family friend or some guy from a strip mall office. I found a woman downtown who's specialized in estate fraud and elder law, someone sharp enough to make mom sweat just by existing. I scheduled a consultation for Monday morning and packed the letter, the will, and every document into a manila envelope with shaky hands and a heart pounding hard enough to make my ribs ache. Then I sat down at my desk and wrote Vanessa a message. Not an explanation. Not an apology. Just a simple sentence. There's something you should probably see. I attached a scanned copy of the will and hit send without another word. For the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the heater and the sound of nothing finally filling the space where pain used to live. Because here's the thing she never counted on. She always wanted me small. Quiet. Apologetic. That was the version of me she knew how to manage. But small daughters don't stay small forever. And once they grow, once they see the strings, there's no putting the puppet back in the box. She spent years trying to crush my spirit, afraid of what I might become if I actually believed in myself. She should have been afraid. She should be terrified. Because I'm not small anymore. There was a version of me, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10, that would have driven over to my mother's house the moment I learned the truth, stormed in like I had something to prove, waving documents in her face, demanding explanations she would never actually give. I would have cried, maybe screamed, maybe stood in her kitchen with my fists clenched so tight they left little half-moons in my palms, asking her why she thought I was worth less than the daughter she polished like a trophy. But that version of me is gone, buried quietly under years of silence and survival. The version that remained, the one sitting at the lawyer's office, signing paperwork with calm, deliberate strokes, was colder, sharper, and honestly a hell of a lot smarter. Confronting her would have given her power again, let her spin her lies and guilt into something that resembled love or sacrifice. I wasn't going to give her the stage. Not anymore. I let the attorney handle it. A woman named Shayla, mid-40s, blazer like armor, voice like a gavel. Shayla didn't flinch when she read the will, didn't blink when I explained the forged power of attorney. She just nodded and said, "We'll freeze her access. File for fraud. You'll have full control by the end of the week." And just like that, with a signature and a stamp and one long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, the money my father left me, my future she'd tried to erase, was mine again. I didn't buy anything stupid. Didn't go on a revenge shopping spree or post about it online like I was flexing. I did something that felt much more dangerous, much more permanent. I moved. Quietly. No dramatic packing scenes, no friends lifting boxes and offering awkward congratulations. Just me, a U-Haul, and a key to a small 2-bedroom condo on the edge of town, near a lake with still water and enough distance from my mother's house to feel like a different planet. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in years, every inch of a space belonged to me, no shadows in the corners, no memories clinging to the baseboards like mildew. A week after the move, I mailed an envelope to Vanessa. No return address, no note, just copies of the will, the letter from our father, and the paperwork showing the forged documents. I didn't need to explain anything. The truth didn't need my commentary. It was clean, undeniable, and it spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. 2 days later, she showed up at my door. I'd been folding laundry in the living room, a soft jazz playlist humming low in the background, when I saw her car through the blinds. I didn't move for a full 30 seconds, just watched her sit there, gripping the steering wheel like she was trying to hold onto the version of reality she thought she knew. Then she got out, walked up the path with slow, unsteady steps, and knocked. I opened the door, already knowing what she was going to say. She lied, Vanessa said, her voice cracked and hoarse, like she hadn't spoken to anyone in hours. She lied about everything. About Dad. About you. She said you dropped out of college. She told me you were always a burden. That you didn't want to come to family events. That you were too emotional, too difficult, too everything. I didn't invite her in. I didn't hug her. I just leaned against the frame, arms crossed over my chest, and said, "She wanted you to hate me. Now you know why." She nodded, like her entire life had just been translated into a language she didn't speak. Then she sat down right there on the steps, head in her hands, and whispered. I believed her. I didn't say anything, didn't comfort her. That wasn't my job anymore. Let her sit in it. Let her feel it. Let her cry if she had to. I stayed silent for a while, then finally said, "You were the perfect daughter because you never questioned the story she told you." I wasn't perfect, so I didn't get to be loved the same way. But now that you know the truth, maybe you'll stop thinking of her as some kind of victim. Vanessa looked up, her eyes glassy and confused. She's not okay. She's unraveling. I shrugged. So let her unravel. That night, after Vanessa left without ever asking to come inside, my phone lit up again. A number I didn't recognize. No name. Just a message that felt like it had teeth. How could you do this to your mother? No punctuation. No context. But it didn't need any. I knew it was one of her friends, or maybe someone from the church she always pretended to love just enough to be seen as good. Someone who didn't know her the way I did. Someone who didn't know how many little cuts she could make before the bleeding started. I didn't reply. I just blocked the number. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed without saying goodnight to anyone. Because letting her cry wasn't cruelty. It was the first honest thing I'd ever done. The phone rang at 6:32 in the evening, just as the sun dipped below the tree line and turned the lake outside my window into one long stripe of gold and fire. I didn't recognize the number, but I didn't need to. Some numbers carry weight before you even answer, and this one sat on my chest like a stone. I stared at it long enough for it to stop ringing, then waited to see if it would come again. It did. Same number. Same weight. Same ghost clawing at the edge of whatever piece I had tried to build. The third time it rang, I picked up. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full of things no one wants to say. Then came the voice, fragile, cracked, and wet with tears, but not the kind of tears that come from guilt or realization. These weren't the sobs of someone reckoning with the pain they caused. This was the crying of someone cornered, someone whose secrets had been dragged into the light and left to burn. "Lena," she whispered, like the name still surprised her, like she wasn't sure I'd pick up, like she hadn't earned the right to say it anymore. I didn't answer. I just let the silence stretch long and slow, watching the sky shift from orange to gray like a curtain being pulled on an old play. I didn't know what else to do, she said, the words stumbling over themselves. "Your sister won't talk to me. Everyone's turning on me. I've given everything to this family, and now it's like I don't even exist." Still, I said nothing. I just listened. That was always my role, wasn't it? The listener. The absorber. The emotional sponge she could wring out whenever she needed to feel powerful again. "I was just trying to protect you," she continued, her voice rising in volume, trembling under the weight of her own delusions. "This world is cruel, Lena. It doesn't care about your feelings. You needed to be strong, and I gave you that. I gave you the tools to survive. I let out a breath, slow and deliberate, my eyes fixed on the bare branches outside my window, reaching toward the sky like they were trying to scratch something open. You call that protection? I finally said, my voice lower than I intended, rough from disuse and too many swallowed truths. You think crushing me every time I had a dream was protecting me? You think comparing me to Vanessa until I hated the sound of her name was giving me strength? She started to speak again, but I didn't let her. You broke me, I said, and the words came so easily it scared me. You didn't do it by accident. You did it slowly, deliberately, over years. You chipped away at me like it was your hobby, like hurting me was some kind of twisted therapy for your own disappointments. And now that I'm not broken anymore, now that I don't need you to tell me who I am, you're scared. She went quiet again. I could hear her breathing, uneven and ragged, like she was trying to sob without letting it become real. We're still family, she said finally, soft as a prayer. We can fix this. You and me. We've been through too much to let it all fall apart now. No, I said simply. You've been through too much. I've been surviving you. I heard her breath catch on the other end, a little gasp that might have once worked on me. Not anymore. I'm not coming over, I said. And I'm not sorry. Then I hung up. No grand finale. No shouted curses or dramatic declarations. Just the sound of a call ending and the unbearable stillness that followed. The next morning, just after sunrise, I got a voicemail. I played it twice. It was short. Her voice was colder this time. Measured. Weaponized. You'll regret this when I'm gone. I sat with that for a minute. Not because it scared me, but because it was so predictable. The final card she always had in her hand. Guilt. The suggestion that my boundaries were cruelty, that my silence was abandonment, that I would be the villain in whatever tragedy she'd already started composing in her mind. I deleted the message. Didn't save it. Didn't play it again later, searching for meaning or signs. I just hit delete, and for the first time in years, it felt like something was actually gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wasn't restless or upset, just alert. Something in the air felt wrong. I got up, made tea, and walked to the window. The lake was still, moonlight stretching across it like ribbon. And then I saw the car. It was parked on the street just outside my condo, half shadowed by the maple tree out front. Same make. Same model. Same dent on the back passenger door. A dent I remembered from years ago, from childhood grocery trips and school drop-offs and awkward holiday drives filled with tension so thick you could chew it. I didn't go outside. Didn't pull the curtain fast. Didn't call the police. Didn't even grab my phone. I just watched. And then, slowly, I pulled the curtain closed. Because that's the thing about revenge, it doesn't always come in flames or fists or courtrooms. Sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is nothing at all. Sometimes, the real act of war is silence. Distance. A door that doesn't open anymore. A phone that goes unanswered. A daughter who finally learns how to vanish on purpose. And maybe that's all I ever wanted. Not justice. Not closure. Just peace. And the power to say, you don't get to hurt me anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that's what scared her the most.